Welcome into Running It Straight on this Wednesday, April the 12th, and we talk rugby league for the next hour with the Warriors focus, of course. And today we're doing things a little bit differently. Generally, we try and get someone out of Warriors camp, but Kemp and I sat down and said, hey, let's open the lines today and have a chat to the fans because we're 6 rounds into the NRL. The Warriors have had 4 wins and 2 losses, and we'd like to know how you're viewing the season so far. A lot of injuries, so there might be some concerns. The roster's starting to shift around a little bit, players playing in different positions. So give us a shout on 0800 150 811 or a text on 8833. We got Kempy sitting here who can answer all the questions, and we're just going to dissect the first 6 rounds so far. But yeah, give us a call, 0800 150 811. And to start, Kempy, we'll talk about, as we always do, the game on the weekend, which of course was the Warriors and the Knights, where the Warriors did go down 34 points to 24, got in a hole once again. Andrew Webster's been talking about this for a number of weeks now, the start not quite being there. And this time round, unlike the Sharks, the Warriors just couldn't come back. But they look tired, Kempy. They look fatigued after 6 rounds and a lot of travel and a lot of injuries. It just looks like there's a couple of tired bodies. Yeah,
it was really interesting, actually. We had Andrew Webster on Izzy and Kempy for breakfast this morning. I asked him that question. The boys are starting to look a little bit tired, and he said that, you know, he didn't really see that happening, but it was sort of evident to me when we were calling the game on Saturday night, especially around the middle of the ruck, how they were not really making first-up contact, and the back 5 of Newcastle, their wingers, their centres, their fullback, were just making easy inroads through that middle of the park, and of course starting to struggle again on the edges, which is not just the Warriors' problem at the moment. It's actually happening to a lot of the teams, I guess, you know, that are struggling to keep points off. We, you know, if you look at the competition, Sam, we had early on low-scoring, really competitive games. Over the last 2 weeks, we've had blowouts, and I think that's really starting to take effect with sides through injuries and fatigue and so forth. And now that we're 6 rounds into the competition, for me, I think we can start to see where the threats are coming from and what the makeup of the 8 really is starting to look like.
So heading into the round on the weekend, the Warriors were 5-1. 4-1, looking to go 5-1. They end up being 4-2. How much of a shift is that? Like, had they won that game and they were 5-1 versus where they're sitting at now 4-2 in terms of how you're viewing the season so far?
Well, so far the season's heading in the right direction. You know, you're going into that mid part of the season, round 12, round 13, where you need to be sharing at least the same amount of points for those games, win and losses. So I think a 4-2 record's not too bad. They've got a really tough 5 weeks to come up with the Cowboys, who are struggling. They've got the Roosters, Panthers. And of course the Canterbury Bulldogs and Storm in that, which are teams that are really, you know, Storm and Panthers are looking like, you know, 1 and 2 again, and the Roosters are there or thereabouts. And of course with Canterbury and the Cowboys, they're both so desperate, like the Warriors, to get wins. You've got to put them in 50-50 positions. So I think the first, if you ask me about the first 6 weeks, you've got to take a big pass mark. But really, come halfway stage in round 12 where they get their bye, that game against Canterbury becomes really significant because it's really a 4-point turnaround for them.
Was there an area on Sunday evening that you thought the Warriors had improved on through the first 5 rounds that they sort of went backwards on?
Yeah, I did. I thought, you know, with the lack of back rowers strike power, you know, we saw Jackson Ford score that try off Chancellor Coxex late in the second half, but up until then they weren't really threatening. I think with Curran back in the side, look, I don't rate him in the top back rowers in the competition at the moment. I think he's well down on the contact stakes, and when he's in the side loses a lot, and because I think their contact in the first up instance has been very good through the 6 rounds. But when you're starting to get players like Curran back, you're losing Neil Corder, you're losing Barnett, Tamari Martin goes, all these senior players, they start to get that feel and look of last year. And it's got to be a worrying trend for the Warriors, you know what I mean? So Newcastle ain't a flash attacking side. 34 points is a worry. So 30 points the week before, 34 points, you know, even though they won against Cronulla, that's the question we asked the following that game. You know, you still let 30 points in. Well, it's 2 weeks in a row now you've let 30 points in.
And only 2 games this season where they haven't let in less than 20 points of the first 5 or 6.
Yeah, so defensively, and Webby said that this morning, it's a constant work on, like, you start to take that contact out of the game, because defence is what's going to get you through to the finals. You take that contact, that first up contact, and that fear of defenders out of the game, and then it becomes more of a passive game, and it becomes a big scoring game. And we know that our edges are under the pump anyway. So we don't start to tighten up that middle and that first contact, because that's where it all comes from. Then when it gets to our edges, you've got Cossey jumping in all the time. Yes, he's knocked a couple of balls down, but you come up against the likes of Nathan Cleary, he'll put you to sleep.
Yeah.
You know, Jerome Hughes, Munster, they'll put you to sleep.
0800 150 811. Jump on the lines. They're free today, and we are keeping them open till around about 3:30. So if you want to have your say on the Warriors, if you want to ask a question or just give your thoughts on the weekend's game, how they've gone through 6 rounds, or maybe you want to chat about the Cowboys this weekend, 0800 150 811, or flick us a message on 8833. Kempy, how hard is it from a coaching perspective, and for Andrew Webster, how hard is it to put a team together in the off-season, and I guess throughout the pre-season, formulate an idea in your mind of the players you're going to have and how you're going to play the game, to then be struck by what is a bit of an injury crisis for the Warriors at the moment with some of their key players out? How hard is it to, I guess, shift your whole mentality, game plan as a coach to essentially a new team?
It's a prophecy, isn't it? You know, like we spoke about that. We said injuries are going to come. Let's hope that they don't come to the senior players. And unfortunately, you're having Tohu, Murata, you know,
Mitch Barnett. These are big players.
Tamari.
Yeah.
You know, and we said we hope it didn't come to those blokes that are actually going to add to the team and have added to the team in the 6 rounds. You lie in bed at night and you're going through that scenario in your head all the time, like, who do I put in? Because you know, as you lose the calibre of player, the lesser calibre player comes in, and it affects the mix of the side. And this is, I was explaining to a mate this morning who was going, well, why was Sean Johnson so quiet on the weekend? You know what I mean? And if you think about it logically, when you've got Marata Nuakore standing next to you on that right edge defensively, and if you watch his game closely, he's a bully, all right? You don't want to go down that side because you're going to get a hiding. And when you're a halfback standing next to him, you know that if they come next to you anyway, they're trying to get away from him, but he's coming to help you, and Sean's defensive game has jumped to another level. The second part of it, when you take Mighty Martin's speed out of it offensively and Marata's line running out of it, now they only have to concentrate on Sean. So it shuts him down offensively. And then you go to the lesser players that are falling off tackles, next to Sean. And then he starts to get a little bit, I'm starting to feel a little bit vulnerable here. And then he doesn't have them hitting those lines consistently all the time, and that speed around the back. Well, it starts to get a little bit condensed and tight for him. And it's logic. You've got to have those players in your side that can continue to perform. And unfortunately for Webby, over the next 5 weeks, hopefully he gets players coming back into those positions, and he doesn't continue to keep losing the same calibre player.
Yes, Tamati Martin out for expected up to 8 weeks. Text us on 8833, couple coming in here, and there's one that Steve sent in, which I was going to ask you about, Kempy. He says, hi guys, the reality is the Warriors are not a top 8 side. They still have to play the Storm, Roosters, Raiders, Panthers, Rabbits, Eels, Dolphins, Broncos, so this will not be the year. That's from Steve. I wanted to ask you, Kempy, if you still think the Warriors are a top 8 side.
Look, I think I've said that I wouldn't make a call until between round 6 and round 8. I've seen enough to say that with the competition this year, now let's go through the competition, let's go through the ladder at the moment. Between 1 and 10, you're separated by 3 points. You know what I mean? Through 10 to 15, you're separated by another 2 points. I think the competition is like that this year. Are they a top 8 side? I think if they can keep the players on the football field, they can sneak into the 8. But they can't go and win the game against Cronulla and then go and lose a winnable game against Newcastle.
Yeah, and we actually talked about that, didn't we? We said on the weekend before the game that those games are the ones that they're almost as important as upsetting a big team, because, you know, you come up against Penrith, you come up against the Broncos, I guess in a way you're not expected to beat them, but you come against a team like Knights and you think to yourself, that's 2 points. right there. So, yes, it's great to have those big wins over teams like the Sharks, but you've got to back it up with a win against the Knights. James from Rotorua sent an interesting one here. Says, Kempy, what's your thoughts on the milking of penalties, especially around calling out head contact and throwing your hands up to convince the refs? I'm all for the genuine ones, but it seems like wrestling classes could be replaced with acting classes in the future. That's from James in Rotorua.
Well, it is starting to look a little bit like rugby, because you get players going down and it stops the game, and I don't like that. So I don't like how it stops the football. I don't condone that or suggest in any way that there isn't an injury going on. But an easy way to fix it, take them off.
Yeah,
so as soon as you go down, you hold your neck. Well, you've got to be replaced.
Yeah.
So send them off. Start using up the subs and using up the HIA as it's meant to be used, as opposed to waiting for the third eye, which is the bunker, to come down and say, no, you need to look at that. Okay, I'm going to look at that. Oh, yes, I've had a look at that. And then 2 minutes has passed and they've milked a penalty. That's what the text is talking about. Look, I think the easiest way to fix it is put them on a stretcher, send them off.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't mind that at all. What about the obstruction rule? Because there were a couple of calls actually across the weekend. There was one in the Warriors game as well where it's minimal contact. You're trying to, a guy is trying to, run a dummy line, or there was the one where the Knights player he passed the ball. Yep. And he was just finishing his run as he passed the ball, and he somehow got in the way. Does the NRL have it right in trying to make it black and white?
No, but they're far from it. Look, it is such a...
But aren't you? But if it's not black and white, then couldn't it be more contentious? Because then you are being inconsistent.
Well, this is a part of rugby league that I find robotic. So every coach, when they're trying to coach a lead runner and a sweep runner, it's like you've got 17 robot coaches teaching the same thing, and it's which spine can pull off the best passes and which lead runners can stop before they go through a defensive line. The one on Lachlan Miller, what does Lachlan Miller do if the ball is thrown to him? He catches it and Sean tackles him.
Yeah.
But because he's in a support line, Sean can't get past him, but he's actually in a support line to catch the football.
Yeah.
And because he can't get to him and the ball goes across him, then it's, you got in the way and you can't make the tackle. So I think that one isn't black and white. They can never get that one right. But they need to make a call on, sometimes it's common sense. Sometimes they just can't. Like that one on Chancellor Clockstead. Know what I mean? When they called that back. That's a try. There's no way in the world that defender was going to get to him anyway. And I think logic has to come down, and a call has to be made by the people that are doing it, and put a footballer in there to make the call.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Or an ex-coach, a first-grade coach, and say, well, I know he wasn't going to get there. Defensively, it was a poor read. That's actually a try. Another
one that someone's texted in here just before we do get to the break, hip drop or no hip drop on Te Maire Martin, because you look at the one on near quarter last week, which was actually a sin bin. Then you look at this one this week with Phoenix Crossland, where a guy's broken his fibia, and there's absolutely no repercussions for that. I mean, I know in the general sense of how we see it, it's not a hip drop, but surely for consistency, it's no different than what happened the week before. Well, they need to make a really clear ruling on keeping your feet when you're tackling. So you've got to stay on your feet. So no more falling, they call it giving your legs up. Yeah. Now, if a player goes through you, for instance, and let's talk about, here's a really clear example of this happening, and you're not even getting your hands to him. Adam Pompey on Best. Now, in that contact, Best couldn't even get his hands to him. And what I'm trying to make a point here, his feet were that good that he got him past him. Now, everyone's feet in the competition is that good that they go past you. So what do? You're not going to keep your feet anyway. If at best you're going to grab him and hold him, and you're falling down anyway. So when they say it's a hip drop, a player doesn't purposely fall backwards on someone's legs. They've got to make the tackle. Yeah. What the ruling has to be is, if you give your tackle up, we're going to penalise you. If you give your legs up. So you can't not use your legs to drive and tackle. Yeah. But mate, it's too hard. So but that tackle on Te Maire Martin? That's not a hip drop. No. He went past. Just unlucky. He went past Crossland. Yeah. So Crossland, he caught a ball on an overs line and was showing and going, and had one-on-one with Crossland and went past him. Crossland just got to him and was falling down behind him. And unfortunately, when you're falling down behind someone, the ankles are in front of you, and you're falling on top of those ankles. You know what I mean? So it's not as if he went literally, I'm going to fall down and break this guy's ankle. It's like, I'm going to stretch out as hard as I can because he's just about to score the levelling try and make the tackle. And unfortunately, your ankle gets stuck in that spot. And the tackle of Villiers on Dominic Young? Yeah, well... the reverse judo. Yeah, I think we could have tackle technique and conversations about... Well, that was its own it's in its own field, that one.
That's exactly right.
He's taken too much from Kai Kara France, I think.
He has. But the point on that, talking about wrestling, and Kai Kara France has got some huge accolades at the beginning of the year. They are not winning the wrestle at the ruck at the moment.
Well, certainly not in that game against the Knights. Play the ball speed for the Knights was much quicker than what the Warriors have given up in recent weeks. We've got the Cowboys this weekend. What we're going to do is take a short break. When we come back, we might have a look at the team lists, the squad that Andrew Webster has named, assess that. But would love your calls. 0800 150 11. Your chance to get aboard the conversation this afternoon on Running It Straight. We don't do it every week. You can keep your texts coming in on 8833 though as well. Running It Straight here on SENZ, thanks to South Seas Healthcare, Auckland's largest Pacific wellbeing service provider. Back in a mo. Welcome back into Running It Straight. You can give us a call 0800 150 811 if you want to talk some Warriors with us. Cowboys this Saturday, 5 o'clock is the kickoff. Live commentary here on SENZ. We do have build-up from 3 p.m. as well. Hopefully a good afternoon as well out at Mount Smart. The Warriors team that's been named by Coach Andrew Webster yesterday, at fullback Chance Nicol-Cloustar, the two wingers Ed Cossey, Marcelo Montoya, the centres Viliami Vailea and Pompey, so unchanged from the game against the Knights there. Then in the halves, he's put Dylan Walker in the number 6 jersey. Of course, Tamati Martin is out. Perhaps doesn't trust Ronald Volkman in the 6 jersey after his showing against the Sharks, so Dylan Walker slots into the number 6 role alongside Sean Johnson. The front row, Adam Whanua-Blake, Bunty Afoa, Freddie Lussick comes in for the injured Wade Egan. He's got a head knock, HIA stand out. Then the second row is Jackson Ford, Bailey Sirinen, and Tohu Harris has been named. Hopefully he starts on Saturday. The interchange, Tane Tuopiki, Josh Curran, Jazz Tevana, and Tom Ale Kempe. There's a lot of questions I want to ask you about the side, but just at first glance, the 17 that Andrew Webster's named?
Yeah, look, I don't think it'll be the 17 that start. I actually think, Tohu's probably still struggling a little bit. Dylan Walker, where does that energy come from off the bench? Dylan Watene-Zelezniak scoring 4 tries in the New South Wales game last week. I think will definitely get a spot on the bench. So there may be a few changes. Interesting around the back row. No Josh Curran in there to start. He was actually named on the bench last week and started in front of Bailey Sirinen, but whether or not he does that again this week, I think that there's still a bit of a mix to happen between now and Saturday afternoon.
So Dallin Watene-Zelezniak's the interesting one, and that's one that a lot of people were talking about because he was one of our best players in 2022. Everyone knows what he brings to the table. He was only only Warrior named in the Kiwis team last year as well. Ed Cossey, who at times struggled last season, he's had a good start to 2023. So how do you see the dynamic playing out with Dallin? Does he get a place back in the first team squad? Is he a better option than Montoya or Cossey on the wings?
Look, I think the outside backs, a number of them are on sort of their final warning, you know what I mean, as far as the way that they've been playing. They've been carried a lot around the game by other players. They're not making, this game last week was won by the back 5 of Newcastle, that they didn't replicate the same type of game for them. If you look at in the context of completions, they basically were identical in the game. I think they had one more set, Newcastle, than the Warriors did, but what they did with the football, what we did with the football was totally different. And, Dallin being back in the side, I think his energy is needed back in the team. You know what I mean? So you have Montoya that lifts that energy up. Ed Cossey's not going too bad. Whether or not, see, the thing with Dallin, he can play across a number of positions. Yep. And, does he move the likes of Dylan Walker back to the bench, move Chance up and put Dallin at fullback? That's something that could possibly happen for Saturday. Or
some people were talking about having Marcelo Montoya go into the centres and Dallin on the wing, given that the centres are struggling defensively.
100%.
So there's a few I guess contentious positions up for grabs ahead of Saturday. What about Dylan Walker starting in the 5 and more so about not losing the impact off the bench, but just him playing in the number 6 jersey? Ronald Volkman, who Webster brought into the side last week against the Sharks, and we talked about clearly struggling. We thought that he had been pulled. Andrew Webster basically said, no, it was a matter of keeping the interchange rolling. It was to do with that more than him getting pulled off for a bad performance. But to me, this signals that he doesn't quite trust Ronald Volkman to come back into that number 6 jersey. So is that the right call? Is Dylan Walker going into that 6 role the right call, or should we be giving Volkman another chance?
No, look, I think it's the right call. I think if he does start there, the question should be like, where's the energy coming off the bench? Because he's made a significant difference on that first interchange for the Warriors, and basically in those first four games made it that much of a difference that they went on and either fought back and won the game because of the efforts that he's been putting on in the middle of the park. So he's not going to be doing that, playing a sweeping role at the back on that left edge. So I'm not really too sure that that's going to be the final starting spot for Dylan Walker. And on Volkman, mate, when you've got a couple of replacements coming back, you've got Tuolagi coming back and Jeremiah Nanai coming back for North Queensland. You put them in alongside the big bodies of Tomalolo and the likes, Cohen, Hess, Ruben Cotter. Like, they'd just target him. They'd target young Volkman, and like they did in that game here where they got away with it. You can't continually chase games all the time because of a person's frailties in defence.
We'll talk about the Cowboys very shortly. The last one I did want to bring up was Bunty Afoa, who's also been, questioned by Warriors fans and members on different forums, etc., for his lack of attacking work rates. I think last week he had 33 run metres across the 30 minutes that he was on the field for his first stint. Now, you talked to Andrew Webster this morning. You asked that question. You put that question to him. Were you happy with the answer? Is it a valid response, or do you think Bunty maybe is struggling a little bit?
Well, there is some truth in it. In the fact that when your sets are spread out, you might be on for a little while without touching the football. But when you've played 30 minutes of football, you're expecting a lot more than 30 minutes for 33 metres if you're playing in the middle of the park. So I think it was a bit of a, I'm looking after my players here and giving them the benefit of the doubt. But you can't have players like that aren't turning up and you're struggling through the middle of the park anyway. If you're not, because here's the devil's advocate playing on this one. Well, if you're not running for 33 metres, then what are you doing defensively? So you haven't got the football. So he hasn't got the football. Okay, so we take that as an answer. Well, your middle got telled up. So what if you've got plenty of energy, what are you doing defensively while you're on for that 30 minutes?
Well, that's probably going to be my question, is whether or not Bunty is doing enough defensive. I personally feel like he has been over the last few weeks, maybe not on the weekend against the Knights, and I think that might have been symptomatic of the rest of the team, but I think it's a good point. Just quickly before we get to the news, run through the Cowboys team. So starting at fullback, Scott Drinkwater, who came back in over the weekend against the Dolphins, Kyle Felt, Mari Tuolangi on the wings, then Valentine Holmes, Peter Hiku in the centres, Tommy Dearden, Chad Townsend in the halves. Then they got Mitch Dunn, Reece Robson, Ruben Cotter in the front row, Cohen Hess, Jeremiah Nanai in the second row, Jason Tomalolo is the lock. On the interchange, Jake Granville, Tom Chester, Jermaine Tanoa-Brown, Riley Price. Unfortunately for the Warriors, that's basically a full-strength Cowboys team, or near to.
Well, desperate too. They're desperate to get some points, and coming back here with the Warriors side that are struggling through injury, especially to some of their senior players. So the fear factor won't be, rolling through that North Queensland side heading here to Auckland. So, look, I think it's going to be a great game. I think you've got two teams. The Warriors especially know how desperate they need these 2 points going into the next 3 games after that. And of course, the Cowboys got to get their ship back in heading in the right direction, because I'd never pick them at this end of the table.
They've got to be one of the surprise teams of 2023, because it is essentially the same team from last year. Todd Payton won Coach of the Year, so very surprising to see where they're at. I guess the argument you can make with teams like the Eels is that they lost a lot of guys. There's a lot of change in that club, but for the Cowboys, it was pretty much the same. We'll talk about the game specifically after news, sport and weather, which is coming up shortly. You can still call us. We'll keep the lines open for another 10 or so minutes. 0800 150 811. There's a couple of texts coming through as well on 8833, so you can send in your questions or your thoughts on there. Listening to Running It Straight here on SENZ, thanks to South Seas Healthcare, Auckland's largest Pacific wellbeing service provider. Back after news. Running it straight, we're about 27 minutes away from 4 o'clock, and we're talking Warriors Cowboys this Saturday at Mount Smart. It is a 5 p.m. kickoff, and the TAB have it at dead evens. Kemp $1.87, $1.87 for each team. So, can't split them at the moment. So when you think the game's won and lost this weekend, Kemp, I know we always talk about the middle. That's basically where we start. But I look at that Cowboys team and so many threats, particularly out wide and on their edges. From what you've seen from them over the last couple of weeks, what you've seen of Warriors, where do you think it's going to be decided on Saturday? Yeah,
look, I think the Edges are going to have to come up with some really big plays this weekend. Once this battle in the middle sort of sorts itself out, they're going to, you look at the Edges. Valentine Holmes, Peter Hiku, 2 of the best centres in the competition. They've got 2 of the best finishers on the wings for them, with a current Australian player and a current State of Origin winger, and also you've got a decent fullback in Drinkwater. So I think their Edges are going to start playing a little bit of havoc through that middle of the park, and our defence really needs to be up on it. I can't split it, to be honest, Sam. I think, the last couple of weeks, the game at home, last game, the kicking game of Sean really kept them in the game. You look at the week against Cronulla, like if it wasn't for a 60-metre kicking game, they were struggling again in the middle, getting out of their own half, and Sean's kicking game kept them back in it. So I'm going to go to the kicking game again at home. Already 19,000 tickets have been sold. They'll have a decent walk-up. We're talking 23,000 people.
Yeah, it's close to full.
Close to full coming to watch. And home ground advantage could possibly be the difference here. They have lost a lot of seniority. Like, I'm not afraid of the edges, you know what I mean? I think when teams look at them, if they're looking at Manata Nuakore and Mitch Barnett out there as opposed to what they've got with Jackson Ford and Bailey Surinam, you're not really packing yourself.
Yeah.
And then you also look at what's going on through the middle of the pitch and the contact. I actually think that the Warriors game against the Cowboys when they travelled up there this year was their best game in the middle of the park. So they rolled through the middle. Some of those sets were fantastic where they rolled through it and got to the end of their sets. And of course they did a number up there, which is a pretty hard thing to do against the Cowboys.
Up in Townsville, yeah. I think the thing that hurts the most, Kempy, is that you think about how this team would be tracking if they had Barnett, Niakora, Harris who hadn't been injured for the last few weeks, because, obviously good win against the Sharks. They were competing against the Knights, considering all those players out, they lose by 10 points. Like, yes, they lost, but I just feel like I just seen a stat as well that with Tohu Harris this year, the Warriors have averaged 14.5 points a game against, but without him, 30 points. So, even just one player there making a massive difference in the middle.
Well, it's the same as the Roosters, isn't it? No Tedesco, and they fall apart defensively because you haven't got a leader. You're talking about leadership. You haven't got a leader in there bringing everyone together and keeping them on the straight and narrow. You start to give piggybacks every set, getting out of your half, and on the back of, which is really a disappointing stat for them, on the back of every piggyback that they gave up points. And that becomes a trend, and then all of a sudden, when you're doing your analysis, coaches are going, if we get a piggyback out, here's where we're going. You know what I mean? They're struggling with this play, and they'll show it 2 or 3 times, and then all of a sudden it becomes consistent, and your defensive line starts to worry and starts to panic. So it is a bit of a worrying trend that you haven't got the senior players here, but. Mate, unfortunately, that's the NRL.
Correct, yeah, that's sport, that's the NRL. Shane's texted in here, what about James Gavay? He's playing New South Wales Cup at the moment and doing well. A little bit older too, at 32, might add a bit of experience to the side.
Well, I think one of the reasons why they pulled James back into the New South Wales squad is because of that experience. So whether or not he's fit enough, look, at the game against Canterbury, I didn't think he was up to NRL scratch play at the moment. So, to have someone come on, here's the problem you got. So they come home, they get one training session, and then they get a captain's run, and then you got players that are starting to fatigue a little bit. So do you add a player that's not ready on the bench, or do you add someone that can actually add some energy, like a Dallin, because Dallin can probably. You talked to Dylan Walker last week about the role that he played when he came off the bench for Desi. You could possibly say the same thing about Dallin. Like, I want you to go into the middle of the park and I want you to hold it together for 10, 15 minutes, carry the football with that energy, and we'll replace you so we can get that middle back going again. And I think that interchange at the moment, it has been stuffed up because of injuries, and it does play a big part in the outcome of the game towards the back end.
Absolutely. The interchange this year, more than ever, I think, for the Warriors has been a massive difference for them. Got some calls coming in on 0800 150 811. You can jump aboard if you want to as well. We'll start with Domo in Auckland. G'day, Domo.
Hey, g'day, guys. Mate, I'm going to just put it out there for the young guns out wide, They've got to keep playing, eh? Dylan's going to get his chance. That's going to come. We're going to get an injury there. Stick with what we've got. Build their cohesion, build their confidence, and they'll come right. I tell you what, mate, they're going to unleash one of these days, and it might be this weekend, and really upset the apple cart, and guys will wake up and see the benefit in giving these guys game time and what have you. And it's the same little Ronnie, eh? The only way he's going to develop is if he gets game time. You can protect him on the D line, eh? You can, but if he's good enough, he's old enough. And, I hear what you're saying, Kempy. They're going to run at him all day. But you protect them, eh? And this is where bunts is crucial, early on especially, But hey, let's see, man. But you've got to just keep on going. You know, we're going to get more attrition, and guys are going to get. You know, Dylan. I love what Webby said there the other day. He's just all what's best for the team, and he's going to play a huge part. You know, down the line, man. We've got 20 games to go. You know, 19, and hopefully a few more. But
that's the competition, ain't Domo?
That's my 2 cents, guys.
Yeah, no, thanks, Domo. That's the question in it. Like, you've got 30 points in the last 2 weeks come through. Like, are you going to be happy if another 30 points gets leaked this weekend?
Yeah, and I take his point as well about protecting a man in the middle and perhaps those middle forwards not being up to it at the moment. I appreciate your call, Domo. Let's go down to Donald in Christchurch. G'day, Donald.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Very well.
I just need to wake up and smell the coffee. It's going to be another year like last year and the year before and the year before. Okay, we started off well. We got a few good wins at the beginning, but how many games did we win last year?
Or not enough to make
5,
the 8.
I think.
Not enough to make the 8. Donald, what do you think is the problem, Donald? With they're 4-2 at the moment, but can you see further issues coming?
We don't have the cattle. We don't have the big hard men. Like in the old days, Steve Price, when he was playing, I'm not really a league man. I'm normally Crusaders. But it's just another year like the last year and the year before and the year before.
Yeah, well, look, for some fans, it feels a little bit like that, Kempy. I think depth-wise, the Warriors really are going to be tested this year because he talked about not having guys like Steve Price. I think when you throw in Barnett and Niokora, you get those hard men. And, you know, we talked about comparing some of these players to guys like Campo just a couple of weeks ago when they were playing. So I think, can they stay healthy? If they can, I'd give them a red-hot chance to make the 8. If, you know, it continues on this trend and all of a sudden we're dipping into New South Wales Cup and we're not sort of, you know, having the experience that we want, then by all stretches, it's going to be a struggle to make that top 8.
Yeah, it's not like last year.
It's not like last year. And the other thing is, you only have to look at some other teams who are going through something similar, right? The Tigers are going through a very similar phase to the Warriors. New coach coming in. They've tried to sign a bunch of players to rev up the side. And in a lot of ways, they're polar opposites. I mean, the Warriors are nowhere near how the Tigers are in terms of their struggles and what's going on at that club.
And they'll spewing they let Andrew Webster go, the Tigers, you know what I mean? Because he was there. He was coaching their junior sides.
Even the Bulldogs, you know?
And that's where Tamari Martin came from. So, look, it isn't like last year. It's unfortunate that we've lost, 4 of our top players in seniority that actually can hold the game together. And I think you've got to be really conscious that this competition is that tight this year that when you're losing 3 or 4 players to your team, it actually throws you down the bottom of that 15. It isn't a top 8 at the moment; it's a top 15.
Yeah.
And weekly you can jump in and out of that 8. So the run that the Warriors have been on, the 4-1, if it went to 5-1, they sit on 10 as opposed to 8. It just changes the landscape of where your competition and of course the feeling in camp. When we get back in round 12 on the bye week, that's when the conversation is like, how are they going? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you'll then know nearly halfway through the season, coming into Origin, whether or not they can hold on to it going into the back end of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. 8833, couple of texts that have come in. Someone says, how far away is Metcalf? Surely he slots in for Tamari Martin. Metcalf went up to the United States, like a lot of them do, to get rehab done on his hamstring. Still indefinite, though, as I understand, Kempy.
He's another 4 weeks.
Another 4 weeks. There you go. Ken says, Sam and Kempy, not Warriors talk, but do you guys got any info on Des Hasler taking over the Dragons within the next few weeks? So Griffin's under pressure, so
100%.
makes sense.
Des will be right in the mix of coaches for any club that we're looking for. A bloke that's been around since 2005. He got his first crack, Des. Yep. 2004, 2005. So, look, St. George, mate, there's a couple of teams that are under pressure at the moment.
And Rory said, just learned Kikau was out for 8 to 10 weeks after a training injury, which is frustrating because once they have Kikau and Pangai on the field, I feel the Dogs are a good chance of making the 8. They're having no luck with injuries. They're very similar to the Warriors, actually, at this stage, Kempy.
They are.
And going down heavily to the Rabbitohs in round 6. We'll take a short break here on running it straight. When we come back, we might have a look at some of the other games on this round. There are some brilliant fixtures starting tomorrow night, of course. I think it is the Dolphins and... My mind's had a blank, Kempy.
Yep.
Dolphins Rabbitohs tomorrow night. So that's going to be interesting. We'll talk about all of that coming up after the break. Yeah, running it straight thanks to South Seas Healthcare, and we'll have a little look at some of the other NRL games on this weekend. Starting tomorrow night, around 7 kicks off with the Dolphins and the Rabbitohs from Suncorp Stadium up in Brisbane. The Dolphins just keep surprising everyone, Kempy, and I've been waiting for the wheels to fall off. They haven't fallen off so far, and they've got a couple of ins back this week as well, with Jesse Bromwich back into the side, the captain, of course. Going up against the Rabbitohs, who, of course, flew high against the Bulldogs last week and showed us just how powerful that Rabbitohs attack can be when it fires. So it's a bit of a blockbuster tomorrow night at Suncorp.
Yeah, and I think, with the Red Cliff crowd filling it out, they're still going to compete, the Dolphins, but I just think that the Rabbitohs clicked last week, and we'll get a couple of good weeks from them in and around what their offence looks like. They're the best in the comp when they do click, and I'm expecting them to put some points on tomorrow. Can
you give me a prediction?
I don't reckon it'll be like a 20, 30-point game, but I think they'll still get them 11 plus.
Sure, okay. The other game that is interesting me very much is on Friday night at 8 o'clock New Zealand time, and that's the Sharks Roosters from PointsBet Stadium in Sydney. The Roosters, I'm not going to say it's a sort of inflated position on the ladder, but they do have 2 points from I guess both of them have 2 points from the bye, but the Roosters are in the 8 at the moment, given they've got those 2 free points. So 11th, the Sharks play the 7th place Roosters. The Sharks are coming fresh off the bye, and they welcome in a bunch of players as well who have come off injury or suspension. So Connor Tracy, Oregon Kaufusi, Wade Graham come back into the side. They don't have Dale Finucane. They don't have Toby Rudolph as well. Kempy, where are you leaning for this one?
Well, I'm actually, this is probably the game of the round. I reckon Cronulla Roosters. It's played at the Shire. Look, James Tedesco being back in fullback for Sydney City, I think, is a massive difference. And the way that their forward pack is starting to get a little bit of size about it, and some seniority players. As long as Victor Radley and Jared Warrior-Hargreaves don't get sin-binned or give away too many penalties, I think the Roosters might steal it.
The Sharks showed us against the Warriors just what they are capable of, and that first 20 minutes, they need to just sort out really staying in it for 80 minutes. But that, to me, is like the Rabbitohs. When they fire properly, the Sharks, I think, have one of the best attacks in the comp, and, of course, Nico Hines leads the charge. So what was your prediction? I missed that. Roosters.
Oh, yeah, look, I'm only because James Tedesco back. So I'm taking them in a close one.
I think I read somewhere that Tedesco's undefeated against the Sharks. Playing for the Roosters.
There you go.
Playing for the Roosters.
Take the odds.
The other game I did want to talk to you about just before we take the break, and we'll wrap up with the last remaining games. Seagulls Storm, 4 Pines Park in Sydney on Friday night.
They can't tackle, mate.
Yeah.
Seriously. The Sea Eagles, seriously.
Defensively,
whoever their defensive coach, they must have had last year's Warriors defensive coach, because they've inherited the can't tackle technique. Mm-hmm. I watched that game last week, and I was astounded at how easy points were being scored against them. They can score plenty, don't worry about that. Trebojevic is all over the place, and the Daly Cherry Evans with the chip kicks and all that sort of stuff. But if you can't tackle, and especially against Melbourne, here's a difference between Melbourne and Penrith. They can score points, but they can stop you scoring points. Correct,
and you're right. I think that the Sea Eagles, they're not a team. They're a team that tries to just outscore. I know that sounds silly because that's the game of rugby league.
They're going to have to score 60.
That's what I mean. It's like they're trying to score high rather than keep the other team scoring low. Cam Munster's starting at fullback as well for the Storm, which I think he's 10 from 12 when starting at fullback. So you're picking Storm that one. In a canter?
Oh, look, I think 13 plus.
Yeah.
Seriously, I've watched a couple of games and watched the replays this week again, and some of the Keystone Cops, West Tigers and Parramatta. Honestly, it was like watching a comedy. There were passes and balls dropped and handing it straight back, and what about the dropout when the West Tigers have got them on the rack, and they drop it, Clint drops it out, and the fullback drops it over the sideline.
Yeah. Like, mate, you think being a Warriors fan is tough at times. That those three teams you just mentioned, it must be pretty frustrating. We'll take one last break here on Running It Straight, and we'll wrap after that. Story on Fox League about Ben Hunt warning about his future should Anthony Griffin be dropped as coach, basically saying I'll basically go with him because I don't want to play under a new coach again. So that's going to be a very interesting development moving forward. Kempy, just the other games quickly over the weekend. Knights, Panthers. Easy. Titans, Broncos.
Battle of the
Beaches.
I'm going to go Broncos.
Raiders, Dragons.
Ooh, Raiders.
and Eels Bulldogs on Sunday, 6:05. It's a good one.
I know, and it's a local derby. I'm going to go Eels.
And finally, Tigers v the Bye.
I'm going to go the Bye.
There you go, running it straight down for another Wednesday. We are back on Saturday, giving you the call, build up from 3 p.m, kick-off at 5 p.m. from Mount Smart Stadium. It's going to be a very good game. Get down there if you can, buy some tickets. Coming up after this, it is the run home. Kids are free. There you go. Coming up after this, it's the run home with Steve McIver and Angus Ta'avo. Back next Wednesday.